The night air in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, always felt a bit heavier than it should. Maybe it was the dense Ozark woods or the way the wind whispered through the ancient trees. But as I stood outside the Crescent Hotel, staring up at its historic facade for the first time, I knew this place was different. The building loomed like a forgotten monument, its limestone walls soaked in decades of secrets and sorrow. I had taken the job out of desperation. My last gig ended abruptly when the restaurant I cleaned shut down overnight. Bills were stacking up, and I was weeks behind on rent. When I saw the night janitor position at the Crescent Hotel, I applied immediately. The pay was decent, the hours odd, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., but beggars can't be choosers. The hotel manager, Mr. Lyle, met me at the front desk when I arrived for my first shift. He was tall and lean, with a face that looked like it had been carved out of stone. No smile, no small talk, just business. "You'll clock in here every night," he said, handing me a key card. "You'll clean the lobbies, restrooms, event rooms, and the old wings. Don't go near the basement unless you're told. And stay out of room 218. If you hear noises from that room, ignore them. Don't acknowledge anything." "Understood?" I raised an eyebrow. "Room 218? He didn't blink. "Just follow the rules. They're posted on the wall in the janitor's closet. Read them. Memorize them." I didn't ask further questions. Something in his voice made me uneasy. After he left, I made my way to the janitor's closet, tucked behind the kitchen. The place was small, dimly lit, and smelled of bleach and something faintly metallic. A corkboard hung on the wall, and on it, typed in bold letters, were the rules. Crescent Hotel Night Janitor rules. 1. Never start cleaning before 10:10 p.m. 2. Do not use the elevator after midnight. 3. If you see a child on the third floor past 11 p.m., walk away. Do not speak. 4. Do not enter room 218 under any circumstances. 5. If you hear a woman crying in the hallway, hum softly and keep walking. 6. At exactly 3:33 a.m., return to the janitor's closet and lock the door for 10 minutes. 7. Never look into the mirror in the second floor restroom after 2 a.m. 8. If your reflection moves on its own, turn off the lights and count to 30. 9. At sunrise, place the mop against the lobby fireplace. Do not forget this. At first, I thought it was a joke, some hazing ritual for new employees, but the paper looked worn, the edges curled like it had been read 1,000 times. I stared at rule number 4 for a while. What was in room 218? I shook off the chill crawling up my spine and grabbed my cleaning supplies. The hotel was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses on your ears. The halls were lit with antique sconces that flickered just enough to feel wrong. As I cleaned the first floor lobby, I tried to convince myself that the rules were just tradition, an eccentric way to mess with rookies. Around 11:15 p.m., I made my way up to the third floor to clean the guest lounge. The air felt colder there. The lights buzzed faintly, casting long shadows. I began sweeping when I heard soft footsteps. I turned around. At the end of the hallway stood a little girl in a white nightgown. Her hair was dark, hanging wet over her face. She didn't move, didn't speak, just stared. My heart pounded. I remembered rule number 3. I dropped my eyes to the floor and backed away slowly, broom still in hand. As I turned the corner, I heard the soft tapping of feet following me, but I didn't dare look back. When I reached the stairs, the sound stopped. The rest of the night was eerily uneventful until just before 3:33 a.m. I was wiping down the second floor mirrors when I caught something in the reflection. My reflection blinked, twice, but I hadn't. I froze. The mirror fogged for a second, like someone had breathed on it from inside. I remembered rule number 8. My hands trembled as I reached for the light switch and flicked it off. Total darkness. I counted, voice shaking. 1, 2, 3. By the time I reached 30, my body was rigid with fear. I turned the lights back on. My reflection was back to normal. I ran to the janitor's closet, locked the door, and waited. At 3:33 on the dot, something began scratching at the metal door. Long, slow drags of nails or claws. I pressed my back to the far wall, clutching a flashlight like a weapon. The sound continued for exactly 10 minutes. Then silence. When I stepped out at 3:43, there was a long red mark across the door. I didn't clean the rest of the hotel that night. I waited near the lobby, watching the horizon. When the first light of dawn peeked through the windows, I remembered rule number 9. I placed the mop against the fireplace. The second I did, the temperature in the room shifted, warmer. The strange tension lifted, like the entire building had been holding its breath. Mr. Lyle was waiting for me at the front desk. "You followed the rules," he said, almost approvingly. "Good, most don't." I wanted to quit right then, but my mouth refused to say the words. Instead, I nodded, clocked out, and stepped into the morning sun, heart still hammering. That night had been my first, and something told me the hotel wasn't done with me yet. I spent the next day lying awake in my apartment, unable to sleep. Every creak in the walls made me jolt. I kept seeing that little girl in the hallway and the warped grin in the mirror. The scratch marks on the closet door were real. I took a picture of them just to prove I wasn't losing it. But I didn't quit. Why? It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was curiosity, the kind that pulls you closer to the edge of a cliff just to see what's at the bottom. There was something wrong with the Crescent Hotel, something ancient and buried beneath all the old wallpaper and antique chandeliers. And I needed to know what. I showed up for my second shift just before 10 p.m. Mr. Lyle wasn't at the front desk this time. The place looked deserted. I signed in, walked past the lobby, and headed to the janitor's closet. The rules were still there, untouched. I read them again slowly, line by line. A new thought crept into my head. Who wrote them? And who enforced them? I grabbed my cart and started with the first floor event room. As I swept and wiped down tables, I noticed something odd. One of the chairs had been pulled out. No big deal, except the cushions were damp, like someone had just gotten up from it. Then I saw the footprint. It was a perfect outline, barefoot, muddy, and small, like a child's. But it led straight into the wall. I froze, flashlight beam locked on the print. I looked around, expecting something or someone, but nothing moved. I backed away and continued cleaning, heart racing. Around 12:30 a.m., I headed toward the grand staircase to mop the second floor hall. As I reached the landing, something caught my eye through the massive window overlooking the back courtyard. There was a man standing there. At first I thought it was a guest out for a smoke, but he was perfectly still, arms at his sides, head tilted up toward me. I squinted. Even from 2 floors up I could make out his face. His mouth was wide open in a scream, but no sound came out, just a gaping maw frozen in silent terror. Then he raised his hand, slow, jerky, and pointed directly at me. I stumbled back, dropping the mop. When I looked again, he was gone. My legs carried me down the hall without thinking. I had no idea where I was going until I realized I had stopped in front of room 218. I stared at the brass number plate. The door was shut, but a soft humming sound leaked from inside. Not music, no, something more like buzzing wires or insects. My hand hovered toward the knob, fingers twitching. I shook myself out of it. Rule number 4, do not enter room 218 under any circumstances. I turned away fast and went back to the lobby. There were still a few hours left in my shift, but I couldn't stay still. I sat behind the front desk, flipping through the old guest logbook to distract myself. Most of the names were normal, scribbled with vacation dates or notes about honeymoons. But then I saw a page that had been torn halfway out. Only the top part remained. Guest, Eleanor Massey. Checked in, October 1907, room. That name rang a bell. I remembered hearing something about her in town. A nurse? No, a patient. Or both. Something about experiments. My skin crawled. At exactly 3:33 a.m., I rushed back to the janitor's closet. I locked the door, sat in the corner, and held my breath. This time, the scratching didn't come. Instead, it was a knock. 3 soft, deliberate taps on the metal door, followed by a whisper. "Are you alone?" I didn't move. I didn't speak. The whisper came again, closer this time, like it was right behind the door frame. "We're all waiting for you. In 218. My blood went cold. I pressed my eyes shut until the alarm on my watch vibrated at 3:43 a.m. When I opened the door, the hallway was empty, but the walls were bleeding. Dark smears trickled from the corners, black and sticky, like tar. They stretched in the direction of room 218, leaving a grotesque trail. I took a picture with my phone, but when I checked the image seconds later, the walls looked clean. I wiped the floor, pretending I hadn't seen it. By the time the sun rose, I was barely holding it together. I dropped the mop against the fireplace and stood there for a full minute, listening. Silence. Then, from somewhere in the rafters, I heard the soft giggle of a child, the same one from the third floor. I turned slowly toward the staircase, and there she was again, standing at the top, hair wet, arms hanging limply. This time, she smiled, and then she mouthed the words, "You're not supposed to be here." I blinked. She was gone. And I realized something then. The hotel didn't want to scare me away. It wanted me to stay, like it was grooming me for something or someone. The Crescent Hotel was watching me, and it was patient. By the third night, I no longer needed an alarm to wake up. My body jolted up at 8:47 p.m., heart already racing, sweat clinging to my skin. I had barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that man's face in the window, mouth agape like he was trying to scream me awake. Still, I got dressed and drove to the Crescent Hotel, heart heavy and thoughts scattered. I told myself I was only doing this to survive, that I'd work one more night just enough to pay rent. But I knew better. This wasn't about money anymore. The hotel had its claws in me now. When I arrived, the lobby was empty again. Mr. Lyle wasn't at the front desk. I almost asked aloud where he was before remembering that speaking to no one in this building might lead to answers I didn't want. I clocked in, headed to the janitor's closet, and read the rules again. I needed to. The hotel liked to change things when you weren't looking. I half expected the list to be longer tonight, but the same 9 rules remained, unchanged, untouched. I began my rounds just after 10:10 p.m., careful not to start a minute earlier. The hotel was unnervingly still, but something felt off tonight. The air was thicker. It smelled faintly of roses and decay. I was scrubbing the baseboards near the second-floor ballroom when I saw her. A woman, pale-skinned, wearing an old-fashioned nurse's uniform, was standing down the hall with her back to me. She was holding something, what looked like a clipboard, but her hands trembled, twitching in short, unnatural bursts. "Ma'am?" I called out before I could stop myself. She didn't move. Then she turned. Her eyes were hollow sockets, no pupils, no whites, just deep black pits, and her mouth was sewn shut with thick black thread. I dropped my mop and bolted down the stairwell. By the time I reached the first floor, the air felt electric, like the entire building was charged with static. The lobby lights flickered. I tried the front doors out of instinct, but they were locked, bolted shut, even though no one had ever locked them before. I backed away, scanning the room. That's when I saw the old man. He sat in a high-backed chair by the fireplace, reading a book. He wore a dusty black suit, skin gray and flaking like parchment. He looked not dead exactly, but not fully alive either. "Evening," he said without lifting his eyes. I said nothing. "You've lasted longer than most." My voice came out hoarse. "What is this place?" The man shut his book and looked at me. "This place," he said, "it's a mouth, a hungry one, built on pain, fed by memory. You feed it every night." I took a step back. "I don't understand." "You will." His eyes glinted. "But if I were you, I'd stop asking questions and start obeying the rules. They're the only reason you're still breathing." I blinked and he vanished. No puff of smoke, no sound, just gone. I was alone again. The clock read 2:01 a.m. I had to clean the second-floor restroom next. I hesitated, remembering rule number 7, never look into the mirror in the second-floor restroom after 2 a.m. I almost skipped it, but something about the hotel told me that skipping tasks wasn't safer than breaking rules. So I went in, keeping my eyes firmly on the ground. I scrubbed the sink by touch, avoiding the mirror completely, but I felt it pulling at me, almost humming. A sick curiosity whispered inside my head. Just a quick glance, just to see if you're still you. I nearly looked. But then I saw something reflected in the water pooling in the sink, a shape behind me. I turned, heart thundering. There was no one there. The mirror, however, had fogged over. In the condensation, a handprint slowly appeared from the other side of the glass. It wasn't mine. Too large. Fingers too long. It dragged across the surface like it was trying to escape. I turned and fled the restroom, breath ragged. At 3:30 a.m., I returned to the janitor's closet early, locked the door, and waited. I counted down the minutes to 3:33, gripping the mop handle like a weapon. And when the time hit, the hotel changed. The lights outside the closet door dimmed. I heard the soft sound of whispering, low, dozens of voices like a crowd speaking in reverse. The doorknob rattled gently like someone testing if I had locked it. And then something spoke. This time, it wasn't a whisper. You shouldn't be here. I held my breath. The voice grew louder, clearer. Room 218 is calling. I covered my ears, shut my eyes. Then silence. 343 arrived like a blessing. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. There was a trail of rose petals leading down the hallway toward the west wing. I followed them slowly, each step tentative. They led me all the way to room 218. The door was slightly ajar. A soft light flickered from inside, and then without warning, I felt a hand grab mine. I spun around, ready to swing the mop, but it was Mr. Lyle. His face was pale, soaked in sweat. He looked terrified. "Don't," he rasped. "You're not ready yet." "I didn't open it," I whispered. "It opened on its own." "I know, that's what it does. It wants you to come in, but not yet." He stared at the cracked door and whispered something under his breath, like a prayer. Then he shoved it shut and placed his hand on the knob. When he removed it, the door seemed to seal itself. He looked at me with sunken eyes. "Finish your shift. Do not speak to anyone else tonight, especially not the man in the mirror." I nodded slowly. When I turned back to the lobby, I saw someone standing near the fireplace, the little girl. She was holding a stuffed bear now, her dress soaked, hair clinging to her cheeks. She waved at me. Then she mouthed something again. "You're staying forever." And this time, I believed her. By the fourth night, I was a ghost in my own life. Daylight barely touched me. I couldn't eat, couldn't think. The Crescent Hotel had burrowed its way into my thoughts like a parasite. Even away from the building, I felt its presence, watching, listening, waiting. I'd catch glimpses of shadowy figures from the corner of my eye, only to turn and find nothing. I heard faint whispers in my apartment vents. Sometimes I swear I'd blink and see the interior of the hotel reflected in my television screen instead of my own reflection. But I still showed up at 10 p.m. sharp, because something worse than fear had taken hold of me now. Obsession. The hotel had secrets, and I needed to know what they were, even if it meant never leaving. That night, the front lobby looked more polished than usual. The antique chandelier above the front desk swayed gently, even though there was no breeze. The air had a strange static again, and the faint smell of burnt lavender wafted through the corridors. I passed the janitor's closet and paused. There was a new rule added. Someone had typed it and pinned it crookedly to the bottom of the list. 10. If the man in the mirror offers you anything, refuse, even if it's your own face. My stomach knotted. That was the second time in 2 days someone had mentioned him, the man in the mirror. I hadn't seen him yet, but I had felt him. That presence in the second-floor restroom, the handprint in the condensation, the tug at the edge of my reflection. Tonight, I knew it would happen. I cleaned quickly, trying to distract myself. I skipped the third floor entirely, couldn't handle the little girl again. She didn't move like a child. She didn't blink. And when she smiled, it felt like death pressing its fingers into my throat. So I stayed on the second floor, slowly moving from hallway to hallway, dusting picture frames, wiping sconces, straightening small details. And then the hotel changed. It always did around 2 a.m. The lights dimmed on their own, but not entirely, just enough to make the world look 2 shades darker, like I was viewing it through fogged glass. The silence was too complete, not piece-staged. When I walked toward the second-floor restroom, every part of my body screamed at me to stop, to turn around. But the rules didn't say not to clean the room, only to avoid looking into the mirror after 2 a.m. It was 2:11 a.m. I stepped inside. It was freezing, the kind of cold that burned. The mirror above the sink was fogged. I didn't breathe near it. This was coming from the other side. The air tasted metallic, like pennies, like blood. I avoided looking at the glass as I dipped the cloth in bleach and began to scrub the sink. 1 stroke, 2 strokes. Then on the 3rd stroke, I heard it, a voice, but not mine. "You've been watching me too," it said softly. I froze. The voice came again from inside the mirror, calm, smooth, and familiar. "I'm just like you," it said. "I started here cleaning. I followed the rules. I survived, but now I'm trapped." I kept my eyes down. "You can help me," the voice whispered. "Look at me, just once, please." I gritted my teeth, heart pounding. The sink water began to ripple on its own. Then I saw movement, not from behind me, but from beneath the surface of the mirror. A hand pressed against the glass, followed by a face. My face, But it was wrong. The skin was too pale, lips too red, eyes hollow and desperate. "Let me out," it said. "I'll trade places with you. You can leave." I backed away slowly. Then it smiled, too wide, too forced. "I know what you want. You want answers. You want to know about room 218, about Eleanor Massey, about what this place really is." It tapped the mirror and a crack formed. "I can tell you everything. Just say yes." I remembered rule 10. Refuse, even if it's your own face. I stepped back and said nothing. My reflection grew angry. "Say yes, damn it," it screamed. "Say it!" The mirror shattered, exploding outward. I shielded my face with my arms as shards flew, cutting into my sleeves and skin. But when I looked back, nothing. No shards on the floor, no crack in the mirror, no blood on my arms, just my reflection, normal but not quite. It was still smiling, even though I wasn't. I left the restroom and didn't return. At exactly 3:33 a.m., I locked myself in the janitor's closet, gasping for breath. I turned off the lights and sat in darkness. Then came the sounds. Not scratching, whispers, a dozen voices, chanting, a language I didn't recognize. And behind them, one voice deeper than the others. "3 more nights," it said, "and you belong to us." I couldn't move, couldn't think. The voices faded at 3:43 a.m., and I stepped into the hall. Everything looked normal, too normal. I walked toward the lobby. The mop was already there, propped against the fireplace. I hadn't placed it, and standing beside it was the little girl. She looked up at me with sad eyes. Then she said out loud for the first time, "You're almost part of the hotel now." I stared at her, heart sinking. "What happens when I am?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "You'll never leave, not even in death." And then she vanished, just like that. I looked at the fireplace. There was a photograph above the mantel, an old black and white group picture of hotel staff from the 1940s. I leaned in, breath catching in my throat. There I was, standing in the back row, same clothes, same face, same haunted eyes, but older, a little more hollow, a little more lost. I reached out and touched the frame, and for the briefest moment, I swore the me in the picture blinked. That's when I realized the truth. The Crescent Hotel doesn't just haunt people, it consumes them. And now it was almost my turn. I didn't remember driving to the hotel that night. I just found myself there, standing in the parking lot beneath the red glow of the Crescent Hotel's flickering sign. The building loomed like it always did, grand and decaying all at once, its windows like watching eyes. I should have been numb to it by now, but as I stepped through the front doors, a chill gripped me that felt new. It wasn't just the cold this time. It was dread, the kind that burrows down into your bones and refuses to leave. I passed the front desk. Mr. Lyle was nowhere to be seen. Not that I expected him. I hadn't seen him since he pulled me away from room 218 2 nights ago. It was almost like he had become part of the hotel, absorbed by it, like everyone eventually did. I headed to the janitor's closet to clock in. The rules were still there. Only now they looked old. The paper had yellowed, curled at the edges. Mold speckled the corners, like it had been pinned there for decades. Rule number 10, the one about the man in the mirror, was gone, scratched away completely. And someone had written in large, shaky handwriting underneath the list, "The rules won't help you anymore." I stared at the message for a long time, my hands shaking. Still, I gathered my supplies and started my shift. Every light in the hallway flickered when I passed. The air felt heavier, like it was thick with invisible fog. Even the walls seemed to pulse with something, alive. I moved from room to room like a ghost, going through the motions, but all the while I felt it drawing me, pulling at me. Room 218. I avoided the third floor completely. I didn't want to see the little girl again. I didn't want her to smile at me with that broken, dead face. I didn't want to hear her voice say what I already knew, that I was slipping, that the hotel was inside me now. By 2:20 a.m., I had made my way to the west wing without meaning to. The hallway was darker here. The lights didn't even try to stay on. My boots echoed on the wooden floors like I was walking through a tomb. And there it was, room 218. The door was wide open, no sound, no breeze, just an open, yawning blackness that seemed to breathe. I stood there for what felt like an hour. Every cell in my body screamed at me to turn away. But something stronger than fear tugged at me. Curiosity, maybe. Or maybe the hotel itself was nudging me forward like a hand at the small of my back. Then I heard it, a woman's voice, soft and desperate. Help me. I stepped forward before I could stop myself. The temperature dropped instantly. I reached the threshold and peered inside. Room 218 looked wrong. It was both new and old. The bed was made with fresh sheets, but they were stained with something dark. The wallpaper was peeling in slow motion, like time didn't quite work in there. And in the far corner, lit by the glow of a flickering lamp, was a nurse, Eleanor Massey. She turned slowly, eyes sunken and hollow. Her lips were unstitched now, but stretched too far across her face, as if something had forced them open. "You heard me," she said, voice rasping. "You've always heard me." I tried to back out of the room, but my feet wouldn't move. "You saw your name in the photo," she said. "That's how it starts. That's how it chooses you." "Why me?" I whispered. "Because you're just like the rest of us," she said, stepping closer. "You were broken before you even arrived. The hotel doesn't hunt the strong, it lures the lonely." Her words cut deep. She reached out her hand. "It doesn't have to hurt. Just come sit. Just for a moment. Let it finish what it started." I felt something pressing at my skull from inside, like fingers searching for a way out. I stumbled backward, finally able to move. "No," I said, "I'm not like you." The room began to shake. The lights flickered violently. Eleanor's face twisted into something monstrous. Her eyes blackened, her mouth opened impossibly wide, revealing rows of teeth that didn't belong to any human. The door slammed shut. I ran. I didn't look back. I didn't care about the rules. I just ran down the hallway, back through the second floor, past the lobby, straight to the janitor's closet. 3:33 a.m. struck just as I locked the door behind me. This time, the hotel didn't whisper. It roared. The walls trembled with the weight of something ancient. The floorboards heaved beneath my feet. I could hear voices screaming, dozens of them, hundreds. And through it all, I heard one voice rise above the rest. Mine. "Let me out!" it begged. "Please, I don't belong here." I covered my ears and wept. When 3:43 a.m. arrived, the shaking stopped. I opened the closet door slowly, fearing what I might see. But the hallway was still again. Normal. Too normal. I walked toward the fireplace in the lobby. The mop wasn't there. Instead, resting gently against the stone hearth was a shovel, covered in fresh dirt, and pinned above it was a photo, not from the 1940s, but from tonight. It showed me standing outside room 218, smiling, and Eleanor beside me, hand on my shoulder. I stared at the photo until my breath turned shallow and the edges of my vision blurred. The hotel was done pretending now. It had made its choice, and tomorrow night it was going to take me. I didn't go home after my fifth shift. I sat in my car for hours, parked just outside the Crescent Hotel, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Every part of me screamed to drive away, to disappear, to leave Arkansas and never look back. But I couldn't, because something was missing. Me. I hadn't felt like myself in days. I couldn't remember what my voice sounded like outside those halls. I couldn't remember my own apartment clearly, and when I tried to picture my mother's face, it came out blurred like an old, ruined photograph left in the rain. The hotel had been feeding on me, bit by bit, night after night. I had a choice: run now, or go back inside and end it. At 9:58 p.m., I walked through the front doors of the Crescent Hotel one last time. The lobby was dead silent. There was no one at the front desk, no music, no creaking floorboards. Even the wind outside had stilled. I headed to the janitor's closet. The rules were gone. So was the corkboard. Just an empty wall, stained yellow where it had once hung. In its place, someone had scratched a single sit into the paint with what looked like fingernails. "You work here now." I took one last look at my cleaning cart. Bleach, mop, flashlight. Worthless. I left them behind. I walked straight to room 218. The door was already open, of course. Inside, Eleanor was waiting. She sat calmly on the edge of the bed, dressed in that old blood-flecked nurse's uniform. Her face was still human, just barely. Eyes sunken, skin gray-blue, but her mouth, it had been sewn shut again. The stitches pulsed faintly like they were breathing. She raised her hand and pointed to the far corner. A mirror, tall, antique, cracked down the middle. I walked toward it. My reflection stared back at me, but it wasn't me. He was smiling, too widely, like he was when he spoke, even though my lips didn't move. "You're finally ready." I shook my head. "I'm not like you. I'm not one of you." The reflection tilted its head. You've already been chosen. The moment you step through these doors, the hotel knows what you are. You don't belong to the world anymore. You belong to us. I turned to run, but the room was gone. Behind me wasn't the hallway anymore. It was blackness, endless, pulsing dark. I spun in circles, trapped inside room 218, only now it stretched for miles in every direction, filled with shadows that moved just out of sight. Eleanor stood behind me now, even though I hadn't heard her move. She raised her hand and slowly peeled the stitches from her lips. Blood trickled down her chin, and when she spoke, her voice echoed from every wall. "There is no leaving," she said. "Only staying. Only service." And then the floor opened, like a wound tearing itself into the earth, and I fell, tumbling through rooms and corridors and decades, past old guests, faces twisted in agony, past bellboys with no eyes, housekeepers scrubbing bloodstains that wouldn't vanish, past dozens, hundreds of other janitors, all broken, all wide-eyed and hollow, cleaning eternally. The Crescent Hotel was built on rot, and I had joined its foundation. I awoke in the janitor's closet, but something was different. It was morning. The sun shone through the window above the lobby staircase. Everything was quiet, peaceful even. I stood slowly, my limbs stiff, like I hadn't moved in years. I stepped into the hall. The hotel looked new, bright, restored. There were guests in the lobby, laughing, sipping coffee. A couple walked past me and smiled. The front desk was manned by a cheerful young woman. I stepped up to her. "Excuse me." I said, "What day is it?" She glanced up. "July 3rd, 1965. I froze. "Pardon?" She chuckled. "I said July 3rd. You must have had a rough night, huh?" I turned to look in the glass door behind me, and there I was, dressed in a crisp, neatly pressed janitor uniform, face clean, eyes blank, and I smiled, because I couldn't stop it. Something deep inside me had settled. I was part of the hotel now, just like the others. Years passed, decades, and still I cleaned. Some nights I'd hear scratching at the janitor's closet door, whispers at 3:33 a.m. I ignored them, of course. I followed the rules, because I knew what happened to those who didn't. Eventually, a new janitor would come, fresh-faced, nervous, curious, and I'd watch them fall apart, shift by shift. I would try to warn them sometimes, but they never listened. They always asked about room 218, and the hotel always answered, one way or another. Because here, checkout is forever, and the job never really ends.